Trump, as far as American presidents go, is an absolute horror show. Let's see what Trump did. Trump moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem after recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. This matters because as if there's going to be any kind of peace process that's brokered by the United States, at least the most realistic one that is agreed upon by most countries that actually have power in the region and have a stake in the region, would say that it would be two states. And part of that two-state solution is East Jerusalem goes to Palestine. It becomes the capital for the West Bank. Now, Trump has very symbolically killed that with this. He also actually just tried to kill it in reality, because US presidents over time have offered various different peace processes, Clinton parameters, for example, being the big one. Trump had a peace plan as well that he proposed, which effectively would have turned Palestine into a Bantustan. Like, he appeased the Israeli right further than any president ever has, I think, in living memory, or at least in my lifetime. This would have been the Palestinian state under Trump. He would have allowed so many of these settlements just to stay in place. The land swaps were much more limited. This is a mess. Look at it. It's like a leopard print. And the fine details of what this actually involves is even worse. He basically gives up East Jerusalem. Now, there are speeches where he does say that Palestinians should have a capital in Jerusalem. He does say that in speeches. But do you know what he means by that? I didn't actually know what he meant by that contradictory statement, because, well, what he actually means is, he doesn't mean East Jerusalem as it's understood. This plan actually has a suggestion in it to give up one neighborhood on the outskirts of East Jerusalem called Abu Dis to the Palestinians, just a little neighborhood outside Jerusalem. And the suggestion from the plan is that Palestinians rename it to Al-Quds, because Al-Quds was the Arabic name for Jerusalem. That was the plan. The plan was to give them the Jerusalem we have at home. And it's worse than that. See here, the Jordan Valley, for a very long time, the Israeli right especially have said that they can never give up the Jordan Valley because it's too important for security. It does have some security significance for Israel, but Clinton, at the time of the peace process in the 2000s, accepted that this significance was massively exaggerated. So the Jordan Valley, which Trump wants to give to Israel, in the Clinton parameters, it was going to go to Israel for only 6 years. It was going to be there for a 6-year interim period and then transferred to the Palestinians. Trump recognized the Golan Heights, the annexed part from Syria that Israel occupied in 1967. They were the first US government to do so. In the world. Another part of this process was it involves a population transfer. It involved a fairly small, albeit, but an ethnic cleansing. It involved a population transfer of Palestinians who live in the Triangle area near the West Bank, including Kfar Qasim, like villages that were victims of massacres in the 50s. It involved a population transfer. Also, in the Golan Heights, he they actually unveiled a settlement there called Trump Heights because they were so happy about Trump recognizing the annexation. Yeah, this was Trump's peace plan. It was basically selling out Palestinians. It wasn't a peace plan at all because Palestinians were never going to accept it, but this was what Trump pushes. Whenever you hear Trump in speeches saying that we had a tremendous peace plan, we would have ended the conflict by now, this is what he means. No East Jerusalem, no contiguous West Bank, little tunnel, apparently a tunnel linking Gaza and the West Bank, bits of desert in exchange, I guess, and a population transfer. Okay. Even if you're dissatisfied with Biden being very much a two-state solution, would probably along the lines of the Clinton parameters advocate, compare that to this. I mean, okay. And that's not all Trump did. Trump also cut aid. The United States does actually give quite a bit of aid to the Palestinians. Trump cut $230 million of it, including $150 million for UNRWA, as well as $75 million for economic and developmental assistance. Biden resumed this cut. He undid this. He resumed this funding in 2021. He restored it. So even that's a difference in itself. Biden's approach to the general conflict, well, most people would say that Biden, and I would agree with this, and other Democrats, even Obama especially, have generally only paid lip service to a two-state solution. They just kind of say it. They say the settlements are an obstacle, and that's it. It seems to be that this war has finally stirred up, at the very least, a conversation amongst the Democrats about moving beyond that. In January in this year, Blinken asked the State Department to start reviewing options to possibly recognize a Palestinian state. Recognizing a Palestinian state, by the way, is, for a Western country, is a big, big step. This was Corbyn. Corbyn ran on this platform. He was going to recognize a Palestinian state if he came into office. I think Bernie Sanders had something similar. But also the fact that Americans are doing this, it's just flirting right now, basically. But the fact that they're even reviewing this option is, compared to the last 10, 15, 20 years, is quite big. It's also inspired changes around the world as well in different countries. David Cameron, of all people, has floated a similar idea in the UK. And there is also quite a sincere discussion from the Biden administration about using any pause in fighting, whether it's humanitarian ceasefire or permanent, using any pause in the fighting to coordinate and plan for reconstruction and future governance with the Saudis and the Qataris. Like, there is actually, thanks to the Democrat initiative, there is actually some incentive towards looking beyond what might happen to Palestinian sovereignty after the war. On top of that, there's actually, you can call that just lip service, so this is just starting, but there have also been actions in a positive direction. He has placed sanctions on Israeli settlers and outposts. So far, I think 3 citizens who are settlers have fallen under these sanctions, 2 of whom led the riots in Huwara, that village that was attacked, and quite a lot of it actually burnt down in last year. But it didn't stop there. They also actually sanctioned an outpost, 2 outposts, the illegals, the outposts that are actually considered illegal by Israel as well. Yeah, the United States has placed sanctions on 2 of them. The United States has never done that before. They've never sanctioned an outpost. And that's actually quite significant right now, because in the West Bank since October 7th, outposters have been working round the clock to illegally build roads, essentially dirt tracks, linking them to already existing settlements. And what that does is they're basically cementing their presence. And what can happen sometimes is if an outpost is there for long enough and it's built up and it's actually like buildings and houses with like power lines and water and electricity and everything, and they're linked to an existing settlement and they've actually got employment relations, then what happens is Israel will just normalize the outpost and make it part of the settlement. And then all the land that's in between the outposts and the settlements become part of the settlement as well. So outposts, when it comes to settlement expansion, is it's very intentional. It's done very calculated. It's very strategic. They try to get particular areas where they can get as much land of the most value as possible by doing it. They have been accelerating that massively since October 7th because there's just less and less energy there to stop them. Yeah, it's really, really bad. So the fact that there's actually action being taken against that now is, albeit small, good step in the right direction. The European Union is actually taking inspiration. That's another thing. The other significance about American presidents doing stuff like this is that other countries often follow. Hungary initially resisted the European Union taking action against settlements, but they've recently backed down. So it looks like Europe's going to go in the same direction. And even in his administration as well, the tone shift is it's quite different. Chuck Schumer, this speech I just saw just recently, he did a few things that were, they don't sound like much, but in the context of American politics, they're actually fairly big. He described Netanyahu as a major obstacle to peace. Normally they would say settlements are an obstacle to peace, right? But actually calling the sitting prime minister who they're having meetings with a major obstacle, that's actually again, a little bit of a newer step. And he actually also called for elections in Israel, which is a bit of a taboo for a democracy to tell another democracy to hold an election. But yeah, he's done it. And Biden, when asked, simply said it was a good speech. He didn't disown any of it. And this coming from Chuck Schumer as well, the Senate Majority Leader. Chuck Schumer is a Jewish senator from New York. He has a very centrist reputation. Actually, his opinion on Israel have been described as hawkish in the past. So I always say this about politicians. Politicians, it's good to remember, are not leaders. They're not. Some of them do have their own idealist positions and they pursue what they actually believe, even if it's a bit unpopular every now and then. But they're also followers. They're followers of public opinion. And it seems to be that they are responding in part to public opinion. They're never going to respond as much as the extreme radical left want them to, because if they do that, they'll lose moderates. And there are a lot more moderates in America than there are socialists and communists. So, it is what it is. That's what you get for living in a democracy, eh? So that's their views on the peace process. Biden seems to have some commitment to, or some interest in moving towards a settlement that would actually be agreed upon by Palestinians, and in a way that actually might involve, or does involve, some tangible action against Israeli excesses and Israeli aggression towards, especially like the West Bank. Then, well, Trump wants to just sell it all out. Trump wants to hand over all the settlement blocks. Trump wants to give up East Jerusalem. He wants a unified Jerusalem. He wants to compensate Palestinians with a pound shop Jerusalem. There's a pretty big difference there, and especially if we're talking about after, like, post-war, when Israel has, if hypothetically Hamas is defeated and they lose governing and military power, then if we're in a position after that war when Israel has no excuse anymore, when they run out of excuses, are you going to want a Trump in office for that situation, or Biden? Like, I personally would rather a Biden. Okay, just saying. Let's say for war conduct. Okay. Trump hasn't actually spoken much about the war. He spoke in the October 7th period, like around a week after that. He went quiet all the way until this month. What did he say at the beginning? Well, first of all, let's look at what he believes in the past. Trump, to some degree or another, supports collective punishment. He likes collective punishment. He, in 2015, talking about ISIS, he gave this really interesting statement that was about saying that I'll just give you the quote. The other thing with the terrorists is you have to take out their families. When you get these terrorists, you have to take out their families. They care about their lives. Don't kid yourself. When they say they don't care about their lives, you have to take out their families. It's like, what the fuck? And okay, he did walk this back a little bit 4 months later, but when he came into office, he more or less didn't go completely away from this idea of collective punishment and extreme aggression. In Afghanistan, he relaxed the rules of engagement for airstrikes in 2017, and lo and behold, the number of civilian casualties skyrocketed. In 2019, I think 700 civilians were killed in airstrikes, which was more than any other year since the very beginning of the war. He loosened restrictions on the use of landmines in 2020, which had been placed in by Obama in 2014. He is a military hawk. He is a hyper-aggressive military hawk. When it comes to ceasefire, temporary or permanent, Trump has not said anything about a ceasefire. At the start of the war, he got in trouble for saying that Hezbollah were very smart. But most of his rhetoric about the war itself is mostly just all roads leading to this would never have happened if I were president. He says that a lot. On October 7th, he simply said 11th, sorry. He said he would fully support Israel defeating, dismantling, and permanently destroying the terrorist group Hamas. He also said that Hamas will burn forever in the eternal pit of hell, which, as far as rhetoric goes, generally not what you're not encouraged, because generally if you use rhetoric like this, as we see with Israeli leaders, is you are at the very least giving a kind of orange light, if not a green light, to kind of step a bit beyond. He then went completely silent until about March, when Israel was planning to invade Rafah. And his answer to that, simply, you've got to finish the problem. when every other country, including Biden, as we'll find out, when everyone else, including Biden, was very hesitant and saying, if you're going to go into Rafah, like, you can't do this without a plan for civilian evacuation. You can't do it. You have to have a concrete plan in place to ensure civilian protection at least as much as you can before going in, which Israel initially wasn't going to do. They were going to go in on the 10th. They have held back now, and you've noticed actually because of the pressure from not just Biden, but also European countries, is now Netanyahu's rhetoric is very much, we're going to protect the civilians. We have a plan in place. We have people who are discussing getting people evacuated. We're discussing making sure that we don't have a massive number of people dying in the crossfire. Like the rhetoric has changed a lot compared to all the Amalek shit from the start of the war. He was asked questions about the ceasefire in this address. He just didn't answer them. He's not interested. He doesn't have any interest in a ceasefire. To Netanyahu, his message was simply, I think you have to finish it up and do it quickly and get back to the world of peace. Yeah, Trump is very much, he's a hawk. He wants to, his entire approach is kill the bad guys as quickly as possible. Civilian collateral, deal with it. But mostly, in basically all these addresses, mostly Trump's big message is that if I were president, this wouldn't have happened. That's his big message. It's about himself.